To kick things off, I wanted to talk about an old project called Carpe Tenebrum. Carpe Tenebrum was the solo project of a musician named Jamie Astenu Stinson. And back in the late 90s, he lived in Norway for about 2.5, 3 years, and during that time period he played in The Covenant, Dimmu Borgir, and did some guest sessions with a few other bands that were going around that time. Jamie was a multi-talented musician. He played drums, guitars, bass, keyboards, and was just a really talented member. He, I think when he joined Dimmu Borgir for their Spiritual Black Dimensions album, he kind of took their musicianship to a new level. And, it was a new level, but I think at the same time he kind of pushed them away from, sounding black metal, as there's a lot more melodic characteristics, a lot more, solo, stuff like that. I think it was around that album when it was pretty clear that Dimmu Borgir was not really a black metal band. I mean, at least in the, in a more traditional sense. So Carpe Tenebrum was Astenu's, solo project where he performed all the guitars, bass, keyboards, and programmed the drums, and also wrote all the lyrics. And from about 1997 until 2002, he did 3 albums. The first 2 were in a style remarkably similar to Dimmu Borgir's Spiritual Black Dimensions, whereas the last one, and I believe this was after he had left Norway and moved back to Australia, which was his native country, he did one more album that was in more of a brutal death metal style, and by some people's claims, that's actually the best album, but I've never heard it. On Mirrored Hate Painting, you get again, a style very, very reminiscent of Spiritual Black Dimensions era Dimmu Borgir, and I don't know for sure, but it almost sounds like these are maybe like throwaway riffs and songs that he had wrote for that album that just, didn't make the cut. And joining Astenu on this album was Nagash, who was the bass player in Dimmu Borgir at the time, and his vocals are, remarkably similar to the vocals he was performing with his main band, The Covenant, at the time. It's sort of a raspy, throaty, kind of, actually, honestly, pretty diverse, vocal style that Nagash had. And I always liked his vocals a lot in Covenant, and, on this album he does a fantastic job, too. It's not just a simple, straightforward, raspy black metal shriek. No, he uses less more, like, I guess I want to say clearer passages, but just like, different voice, style, and it makes it diverse and interesting, and that was one of the reasons why I always loved Covenant's Nexus Polaris album. The bulk of the music on this album is extremely fast. It has programmed drums, but I'll be honest with you, if it didn't say programmed drums, I never would have guessed it was programmed drums, because they sound very realistic, whereas a lot of programmed drums in, black metal records, especially older ones, they don't sound very convincing. It sounds, fake. But here in this album, it actually sounds like a real drum, which is really impressive. And this is an album that I want to say back in the day, like way back in the day, like back in like the Napster days, I had downloaded some MP3s from and had intended to buy it, but I just never got around to it. And I don't know if it's because I couldn't find it back in the day, but I found this on Discogs. In fact, a brand new wrapped copy for $8, and I was like, fuck yeah, why not? And I think the motivation for just looking at this album is that I was listening to Nexus Polaris, and I was thought to myself, like, what was some of the other albums that were coming out around that time? Then, and obviously, remember Nagash had played in this band. I was like, oh yeah, that Carpe Tenebrum band. Whatever happened with that? So I looked it up, and I was thrilled to find a copy for so cheap. So this is a 39-minute album, and in that time frame, they go through 8 tracks, and again, this is very speedy, high-speed black metal here, but, with tons of melodic characteristics, lots of solos, symphonic keyboards, and, again, Nagash's, somewhat distinctive black metal vocal style. The weird thing about this album is, even though as I like it, there really isn't a single song that, sticks out and makes me go, like, yeah, this is a real banger of a track. No, I think it kind of, the whole album is good, but just nothing that really blows you away. But if you listen to it as a whole, it's like, yeah, this is a good, just chaotic, melodic, black symphonic metal album, and it's good for what it is, but again, it kind of reinforces the idea that these could have just been leftover tracks that Astenu had wrote for Dimmu Borgir, but they just did not make the cut. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, Astenu was actually an Australian musician who was, I'm assuming, living in Norway on a work visa back in those days. And it would seem sometime after Spiritual Black Dimensions came out in 1990, and he must have moved back to Australia, and it seems like he kind of just disappeared after then. I mean, he made one more album with Carpe Tenebrum in 2002, but then that was it. And it seems kind of strange to me that such a talented musician would just disappear from the scene, but he literally just disappeared, and there hasn't really been a lot of information about him since then. So it would seem that he just retired from music, which is weird because, you know, he would have only, you know, probably been in his late 20s at the time, so it seems weird that he didn't get a new band going in Australia or just continue doing, you know, other solo projects since he was such a talented musician. So while I do enjoy this album, the thing that really kind of makes it icky and not appealing is just that album cover. Like, wow, look at that. That is just, man, something about that, you know. It's got like the hype sticker on it too and everything, but I just have this feeling that this album did not sell very well back in the day. And, you know, a good album cover can help sell stuff, but, you know, in this case, it did not help at all. It's just such a generic, plain, boring cover, and just, yeah, I don't know, man. There's the back cover. You know, I got a track listings all there. It was released by Head Not Found Records, which was a really cool, you know, Norwegian black metal label back in the 90s. They had a lot of really good releases. And here we are. I'll show you a CD. There's a CD, just a normal black CD. Side panel, and then here's the booklets. Different cover again. Lyrics, pictures, the band, more lyrics, more artwork, and then on the back cover there's another picture of that's the new and Nagash. So yeah, kind of an underrated album, but in a lot of ways not so much underrated too. I know it doesn't make sense, but like, again, as I said, if you listen to this album as a whole, it's pretty cool. I mean, you know, again, not no clear standout track, but, you know, I'm happy to finally hear this album again in its entirety, all, you know. And actually, you know, a year before this album came out too, there was one more Carpe Tenebrum that this duo created, and I'm kind of curious to hear that now, just to see if it sounds similar. I've heard it sounds similar, but, you know, curiosity has definitely been kind of nagging at me, and I think I'll definitely have to pick it up soon and see if it's, you know, similar. So that's Carpe Tenebrum, Mirrored Hate Painting. Alright, so we're moving on, and this next album, I actually, I owned way back in the day, at least 20 years ago I bought this album. I think just, I heard a random song from it, and I was like, wow, I like this, and I picked it up, and I enjoyed it back then, but at some point in time, I sold the album, and then it just, you know, it disappeared from my collection, and then, you know, time passed on, and then I realized it was gone, and then I was like, what the hell? What happened? Where did it go? So I can't remember if I just accidentally sold it, or if I traded it with someone, or what it was, but 3 or 4 months ago, I happened to come across a re-release of it, and I was thrilled because I was like, oh, hell yeah, that album! So I instantly picked it up. And the album in question is And Oceans, and their album, The Dynamic Gallery of Thoughts. So, And Oceans was, and still is, a I guess, symphonic melodic black metal band from Finland, and for their time they were interesting, I guess. They weren't necessarily different, but there was a lot of characteristics that were not so typical for Finnish black metal and really just black metal in general. For example, I mean, the name itself is peculiar. It's just ... and oceans, and I'm not sure if that's like something from a poem or what it is. I could probably look it up and find it out, but I've never bothered to do so. So the band's name is peculiar at the time, you know, at the time, and still is today. They also had, you know, kind of strange, you know, band photos. You know, there was no corpse paint. They had, you know, they were making weird faces in their photos and stuff like that. They also had weird lyrics. You know, there was nothing about Satanism or occultism. You know, nothing really anti-Christian. They had much more eccentric song titles and, you know, just subject matter. And they also, even though they were a Finnish band, they, I guess they wrote almost all their lyrics in Swedish. And I know there's a part in Finland where they speak Swedish, and I'm not sure if these are like people that are half Swedish and half Finnish, or just for some reason there's you know, Finnish people that are speaking Swedish. I don't really know. I think ethnically they're Finnish, but they speak Swedish. I don't really know. But maybe if there's a Finnish viewer, you can fill me in the details there. But all the lyrics are in Swedish, at least on this album. And, you know, obviously that's different. You know, obviously if you're from Finland, you would anticipate them to either write in Finnish or to write in English. So this re-release, which was released by Season of Mist, which I, if I'm not mistaken, was also the original label, also gathers together the 4 tracks from the Bloodthorn split album, which came out in the late 90s. And, interestingly, the Bloodthorn, you know, split tracks are in Finnish language as opposed to the Swedish I mentioned earlier, and I'm really glad they have these bonus tracks on here because I had never heard that original recording with Bloodthorn, original split with Bloodthorn, and once I heard these tracks I was like, wow, this is really good stuff, and I'm glad they you know, included them on this re-release. So musically, And Oceans was, I get, you know, again, kind of a melodic symphonic black metal band, you know, they were much more mid-paced in their style, you know, there was some blasting sections, some really speedy guitar parts, but generally speaking they were a more mid-paced black metal band. The keyboards had a very neoclassical-ish sound, you know, again, comparable to a lot of stuff that was going on in, you know, the scene in the late 90s, but, you know, it was, you know, again, you know, kind of comparable, like, you know, Dimmu Borgir, stuff like that, you know, the similarities are pretty obvious, but it doesn't sound exactly like it, which is what I like about it. It has its own special sound, and you know, a lot of black metal from the 90s just it was unique for its time. It had a certain feeling, a certain atmosphere that just, you know, you just don't hear it nowadays, and that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to pick this album up again, just you know, hear it again. And I was just, you know, once I got it in my stereo, I was like, yes, such a good album. I couldn't believe why, you know, or understand why I sold it or traded it all those years ago. Okay, so yeah, the music is, you know, symphonic, melodic black metal, and there's some traits in the music too that is a bit weird. For example, there's like these sort of like high-pitched shrieks, and there's like this sort of like this scheming sort of laughter and stuff like that. And then this one song, there's like this kind of like yodel thing the song starts out with. It's really weird, and I think they were sort of one of those bands that was sort of being weird for the sake of being weird, but it wasn't quite avant-garde. And so, as far as I can remember, this was the last black metal sounding album the band did. After that, they wanted a more industrial metal sound, and eventually the band changed their name to Havoc Unit, and I think went for a, you know, I think again, you know, industrial sound. I want to say they did like 2 or 3 albums under that name, and then I believe more recently they reformed again as And Oceans, and now they're doing something comparable to this old sound. Songs I really like are the opening track, Troll Fan, or the 7th song, Semtol med Tenkar, Halo of Words, which is just, you know, really strong, really awesome symphonic black metal, really good stuff. I mean, this is the kind of music where the keyboards are really center stage here. You know, there are melodic riffs and, you know, all that kind of stuff is there, but it's generally kind of pushed way more into the background. So the main highlight here is the keyboards, and they're performed exceptionally well. You know, very neoclassical-ish in style, and just really cool. You know, some piano parts and stuff like that too. You know, really cool. If you're a fan of symphonic black metal, you're gonna love this album. Just really cool stuff. And you know, again, it's really cool to have this in my collection again, and you know, it's great hearing it again after all these years, and adding those tracks in the Bloodthorn split was super cool too. Okay, so let's check out the front cover. So the front cover has, you know, some sort of like, I don't know, it's like some sort of writing and a map, I guess, which, you know, again, kind of, you know, plays into that whole, you know, not real typical thing that was, you know, present in, you know, Scandinavian black metal at the time. And the back cover, we have the track listings, and, you know, you can see there all the song titles, plus the other ones, songs taken from the Bloodthorn split. And then here's the CD, and I'm really glad I bought this re-release because, quite honestly, I don't remember if the original had all this cool artwork in it, and that's really cool that's in this re-release. So there's a picture of the band, and, you know, again, kind of mentioning, you know, what I brought earlier, that, you know, they didn't have very typical band photos. So there's the front cover again. Then what's really cool about this album is that each little page is basically, you know, artwork to accompany the song, and the artwork is really cool. I really like it a lot, and I can't remember if that artwork was in the original version. Yeah, really cool. I mean, every one of these little paintings here, you know, could have just well been the album cover too. Very, very cool. Love it a lot. And, you know, as I've always said, this is one of the benefits of, you know, buying physical releases. You get that album cover, you know, get all that cool artwork, and it's just so cool, man. Yeah. Very, very cool. You know, this is stuff you wouldn't see if you had a digital release, you know. Yeah, all the lyrics, yeah, very cool. You know, again, there's a picture of the band. Like I said, you know, they're very eccentric, you know, for the time, different, weird. They even, you know, had the glasses and the tongue sticking out. Just, there wasn't really a lot of black metal bands that did stuff like that back then. Another picture of at least two of the members. They also had really weird names too, you know, they weren't just calling themselves like Goldfucker and, you know, Necrosleazer or stuff like that, or whatever, you know what I mean? They had really weird names too that kind of just, you know, go with their weird music. So, yeah, I mean, that's And Oceans, the Dynamic Gallery of Thoughts, really cool, you know, very symphonic sounding black metal. If you're a big fan of keyboards and black metal, look up this classic album, you're gonna love it. Great stuff. Right then, up next is a project that surely needs no introduction, and it is a project that is notorious as well as being infinitely influential in the Norwegian black metal and, well, the black metal scene in general. This particular release is something I bought on a whim back in, I think it was early summer when it was released, and this is a project where virtually everything has been released at this point, you know, but this one's really scratching the bottom of the pot for the leftovers. This is, well, okay, so, the project in question is Burzum, and it is the Burzum Urukai unreleased material 1998 to 1994 compilation. So, I guess the history of this release is it was originally in 1994 when Burzum's sole member, Varg the Cairnes, was in jail. And if you don't know who Varg is, if you don't know who Burzum is, I'm not going to go into that right now. You know, search it on Wikipedia, you're going to get all the details, and you're probably going to want to know the details, because now that I just mentioned that this guy was in jail at the time. So Varg was in jail in 1994, and he would continue to be in jail for several years after that. In 1994, he made this one-off tape, which was sort of a compilation that he sent to his then record label, Misanthropy Records, one single tape, and this was the only known copy in existence until the owner of Misanthropy Records, I believe her name was Tazania or something like that, she sent the tape to the Burzum Museum, which is a very popular, like sort of a collection page on Instagram and Facebook, where this guy just collects all this totally random and obscure Burzums. It's fucking really cool. I love just all this really historical stuff you can't find there. Really cool stuff. So she sent it to him, and then he posted on YouTube, and then at some point in time, Darker Than Black Records, or their sub-label, Arcadian Music that is, decided to actually release this on CD. And totally impulse buy on my behalf. I mean, I love Burzum, especially the stuff from the early 90s, but when he got back to making music around 2010, I wasn't particularly blown away, and it just kind of got really bad after that, and eventually just gave up on music altogether. But, you know, stuff in the 90s was really cool, and this was just an impulse buy, and I just kind of thought, well, if I buy it, because I know it was pretty limited, I might be able to resell it later on for a good value or something. I don't know, whatever. Either way, I wanted to hear because I was curious. So, it is essentially a collection of very raw demos from Varg's earliest project, which was known as Urukai, which was a project he was doing I guess in the late 80s, you know, before Burzum, before he joined Old Funeral, and Old Funeral was a death metal band that he was part of for about a year. The Urukai stuff is, you know, extremely lo-fi and simplest. Some of it's just, you know, riffs and stuff like that. But what's really interesting about this old material is that if this stuff is really recorded in 1988, then that undoubtedly, you know, solidifies Varg's, you know, position in the Norwegian black metal scene as being like the first one. He was undoubtedly the first black metal musician in Norway, and it's just really interesting. I mean, hearing it, you know, thinking about it from a historical perspective. But what's actually on this compilation, it isn't really going to blow anyone away unless you are like the most rabid, crazy Burzum fan, and that I am not. As I said, I love all the old stuff from the 90s. It's all fucking fantastic. You know, essential black metal as far as I'm concerned. And, you know, anyone knows anything about black metal will tell you the same. But these demos on this disc are not exactly going to blow you away. Some of this stuff is just like, it's a little over a minute long. It's just a very basic riff, repeated through for a minute or so, and then it just cuts off. It was never really intended to be released to the public, but as it's kind of gone with Burzum, as I kind of said at the beginning, he really just scratched the bottom of the pan, really getting all that good stuff out, and yeah, every little bit has to be released. Everything has to be done for historical purposes, and this is nothing that's really going to blow anyone away. So, what does make this interesting, though, is some of the riffs and Orakai stuff, you can actually hear these riffs in the Burzum albums that got released for like 2010 and so on after there, and it's interesting to know that, some of these riffs were composed way back then. I mean, that's interesting hearing, that. But other than that, there's not really much going on in this recording, and considering the fact that the whole thing is only 21 minutes long, well, it doesn't really, give it much replay value either. But, if you are a insane Burzum or Varg Vikernes fan, this, might be worth picking up. I got the CD version because, I had to order it from Germany, and shipping costs were already expensive for the CD version, so I went with that. And then I guess there was some big delay on the LP versions after all anyway, so, whatever. I'm glad I didn't get that version. But, yeah, this is, like I said, impulse buy, and generally speaking, nothing really it's going to blow you away. It's just kind of interesting hearing that some of those riffs that were used on later Burzum albums were recorded in the late 80s. And again, it really solidifies the fact that Varg Vikernes was undoubtedly the first Norwegian black metal musician. So on the front cover we have some sort of painting. I'm assuming it's something very old. I don't know. Back cover we have the Orakai songs are first, and then the Burzum songs are... So I should point out that the Orakai songs were allegedly all recorded in the late 80s, whereas the Burzum songs were recorded in 1994, while Varg was just starting his prison incarceration. And then we have the CD here, which is, again, just, just like the front cover. There's the panel there. And, well, here's what it says in the actual booklet. Wow, I have not heard this in a long time. In fact, I had forgotten all about this. It must be from a recording I did in Bergen prison in 1994 on a 4-track cassette player that I was allowed to have, along with my now lost guitar, for a very short time in my cell. At least I used that time well and recorded this. What a shithole that prison was. One of those fancy new prisons, completely void of spirit, and where everyone is treated with clinical hatred. I spent a year there before they sent me to Illa prison. Thanks for letting me listen to these tracks again. So many memories. Varg Vikernes, 2018. And there's that right there. So yeah, obviously even Varg had forgotten about this, and by 2018 he had already been out of jail for about, I think, 8 or 9 years, but obviously it was something he'd totally forgotten about. So yeah, the Burzum stuff was recorded in 1994 when he was in jail, and the Orakai stuff was recorded long before that, allegedly in the 80s. I don't know how much it was limited to. I think it was pretty limited, so it may be sold at this point, just because of how infamous Burzum is, but impulse buy sometimes leads to this stuff, and it's not anything too interesting, but whatever. It wasn't horribly expensive, and I bought one other album along the way when I bought that one, so, whatever. It is what it is. But anyway, that is the Burzum Orakai Unreleased Material CD, 1988 to 1994. Alright, we're going to talk about one more album in this collection update, and the album in question is Arkona's Imperium. Arkona is a black metal band from Poland who formed as early as 1993, and along with Behemoth and Graveland and Velis, they are undoubtedly one of the earliest Polish black metal bands. Imperium was originally released in 1996 on Astral Wings Records, and as far as I can tell or know, it went way under the radar at the time, and this is a record and a band, I gotta be honest with you, I had never even heard of until maybe about 8 or 9 months ago when I picked this album up, and I was absolutely blown away. This is really, really good mid-90s black metal. I mean, You know, again, if you're a fan of, you know, early Behemoth, Graveland, Veldus, Sacrilegium, or even something like a newer project like Evil Feast, you are really going to like this album. This is, you know, basically raw black metal with a lot of keyboards and, you know, some kind of folky kind of, you know, touches to it here and there, but really just raw, hate-filled black metal with sort of, you know, I guess I want to say keyboards that are very similar to Emperors in the Nightside Eclipse, while not sounding exactly like that album. You know, very reminiscent of that, because the album had come out 2 years before that, and obviously it was an influence for them, but, you know, a pretty special album that, you know, I had never heard of, and I don't think a lot of people had heard of this album. It, you know, went way under the radar back then, and I just kind of randomly came across this band on Bandcamp one day, and I was like, okay, let's see what this is. And originally, I think I thought it was the Russian folk black metal band. I think or maybe there's pure folk metal. I don't know. But anyway, there's a band from Russia called Arkona, who's been going for, I think, at least it's late '90s. But obviously, this is the Polish one that's been going since the early '90s, and this is just really great stuff. Really, you know. There was something really special about Eastern European black metal in the early to mid-90s. It had a very distinctive sound that I can't totally, you know, tell you about it. It's special. You have to hear it. But, you know, obviously it had traits of Norwegian black metal, but it just had this very unique production, very special atmosphere to it that, you know, again, you don't get nowadays with, you know, a lot of black metal. And just a lot of bands back then. Really cool Eastern European bands, like, you know, you had like Nocturnal Mortem or Naguro Bunget, and you know, all other bands I mentioned before. Like, the Polish scene was really fucking good in the early '90s, and just so many cool bands back then. It's really special sound, and this is an album I'm so psyched to get, and just awesome stuff. Just superb raw black metal here. The interesting detail too is that all the lyrics are in Polish, and I you know, generally prefer when, you know, non-English speaking bands stick to their native tongue. I think it adds a special, you know, element to their music that is otherwise removed if they sing in English. And you know, for me, like, I always love hearing the Polish language. I kind of grew up with it as a lot of my ancestral heritage is from Poland. I have, you know, members of my grandpa yelling at my my grandma in Polish when he got mad at her, just, you know, for the most benign things, just, you know, stupid shit like that. But yeah, that was there when I was a little kid, so it's always interesting, and I have, I guess I'm sort of partial to Polish black metal, or Polish music in general, because of my heritage. Okay, so there's the front cover, and I gotta be honest with you, the front cover's kind of boring. It's just, you know, a skull, and, you know, it's been done so many times before. This album's been actually re-released numerous times leading up to this re-release, and it's had like 4 different covers at this point, and I still kind of feel like the original cover is kind of like the best one. I mean, sometimes, you know, in the case where the album cover is really bad, I understand the change of it, but the original one wasn't particularly horrible, so I don't know why it's been changed so many times, but yeah, there's been like 4 different covers for this album. So there's the back cover with the track listing. As you can see, all the song titles are in Polish. Very cool. There's the inner panel with some lyrics. There's that over there. CD and more lyrics. Fortunately, no real cool band photos, I don't think. Or was there one underneath there? I can't remember. Just that. So no band photos, but oh wait, there's one right there. I got a small band photo there. Yeah, but yeah, they were you know, true to the bone black metal, you know, corpse painted black metal band. You know, very raw sounding guitars. You know, it's just really great stuff. Yeah, I mean, if you've never heard Arkona, I highly check it out. I highly encourage you to check it out. Really great stuff. That's Arkona and their album Imperium. Alright, well, there's 4 black metal albums worth looking up, save for maybe the Burzum one, but I had to show it anyway because I had gotten my hands on it. But the other 3 are superb classic black metal albums. Well worth your time. Really great stuff, especially that Arkona and Dan Ocean stuff. Just awesome stuff. Really cool. Thank you as always for joining me in the channel. Like, share, subscribe. You know the routine. Do it if you want. If not, well, like I said, it is what it is. Anyway, my name is Joe. I will see you next time.